I didn't.
Morning, everyone.
Yeah. Please, go ahead, since you're up there. Let me get my stuff out of the way.
So that was a very interesting discussion on developing markets and how to best optimize your business for them and keeping on top of what's happening there. I'm going to talk about kind of the other side of the coin today, and that is some of the gray markets, seeing companies exiting them, seeing some of those shape up in different ways. You would think this is a pretty simple topic, but the devil's in the details, so we're going to share some interesting data and insights from you, with you today. My name is 𝐤𝐬 Wiltshire. I am the CEO and founder of a company called TESTA. TESTA is a crowd testing company. So that means we have people on the ground in markets all over the globe. I think our current count is something like 120 countries, 3,000 testers. So we've got a unique perspective on some of these things. We'd like to share some information with you today. So if you're like me, you read a lot of regulation news. It seems like half the job of being an iGaming executive is just to keep up on top of all the things that are changing at any given time. So this market is open, this market is closed, this new license is coming, this license is cracking down. Things are always in a state of flux in the last few years. But at the end of the day, players don't actually interact with policies. They interact with software. Sometimes we forget that. When intents are stated, 95% of the time, the reality looks like something like the intent or what's stated in a press release. But when we look at information from the ground up, sometimes we find that there's edge cases or little gaps that aren't totally accounted for. So we're going to get into some of that today. The schedule for kind of what I'll go through in the next 10, 15 minutes looks a bit like this. First, we'll talk about the macro, just the global regulatory shift in the last couple of years, where the kind of pressures for a lot of this are coming from. We'll get into kind of the thesis of the whole presentation today, which is the intention-reality gap. As I said earlier, things that are stated or, businesses set their intents, but then how they actually break down. We'll look at 3 distinct case studies, one in New York to do with provider exits, one in the Philippines about operator compliance, and one in India about kind of things from the regulatory perspective. At the end, we'll try to tie it all together and make it make sense and give you some practical kind of strategies for dealing with all this. So 2025 was a big year for the industry. A lot of things changed in the regulatory framework. Brazil opened, India totally closed quite suddenly. There's new sectors in the US with prediction markets, with sweepstakes, and we saw a lot of pressure on providers in Europe, North America, and other places to start explaining a bit more about what other markets they serve and channelization and what kind of technology they use to keep certain channels in or out. So things continue to change. Most businesses in our space are not trying to run afoul of regulators. To do so could mean a very bad quarter or very bad year, could even end the company if it's bad enough. And regulated businesses always preach how important it is to follow, the state of compliance and KYC and regulated gambling and all these things that make the sector safe. But as I said earlier, sometimes when you look from the bottom up, you see these edge cases, you see these gaps, and there's a divergence between the intentions and the reality of the situation. When we surveyed some of our customers, most operators report having something between 30 and 40 technical integrations. So these are suppliers or bits of the software stack they don't totally control. I mention this to just make a point that it's more complicated than ever to deliver an iGaming product, even if you have more systems and bits and pieces that you can use for help. So the technical complexity is high, but for the operators especially, they are still accountable for the whole thing. As we said earlier, players interact with this software. They need to be accountable for what happens on the ground. A provider may think they've exited a jurisdiction or a geo, but the games could still be available. A regulator may think they've blocked access, but player traffic is still higher than ever. Operators may think they're compliant, but things like KYC are about process goals and not just having the right tools kind of put in place. So let's get into our first example. In June of 2025, the New York State Attorney General said, we have a legal opinion on sweepstakes casinos and they're not legal. Get them out. So I think there were 16 sweepstakes operators at the time. All 16 said up front, okay, yep, we'll close up shop. If you were just reading the media, it seemed pretty cut and dry. So, you know, simple, right? We're curious, so we've got testers all over the globe, like I said. To verify this, we said, you know, why don't we take some of our testers in New York State, and I think about 1 or 2 weeks after, all said they had exited and the law had effectively gone into order, we asked some of our testers to just take a look at these 16 sweepstakes operators. So again, these are real people that live in New York State. They're not using VPNs or proxies. They have local IDs. They're on a local internet service provider, etc. From this kind of flow, you can see that we like to use simple language when we talk about issues of compliance. You know, is the site available or it's not? It's blocked or it's not. We make it nice and black and white because it's simple. But if you actually look at a sweepstakes operator and break it down, it actually looks something a little bit more like this, right? There's different layers of access or interactivity with the site. At the top, can you access the site at all? If you go to, you know, 𝐤𝐱𝐢𝐿, whatever, does anything load, right? The next state would be, can you see what content's on the site? Can you see what games are available or where you can move around? Finally, you've got some sort of gate, registration flow or a login where you need to have a profile to continue to play or do whatever's next. In the sweeps model, you then have gold coin gameplay, which is the free coins. And then finally, the kind of last step is a sweeps coin gameplay, which is redeemable for actual cash value. So as we kind of go down this line, we go from visibility and maybe PR risk to some sort of interactivity to, okay, now they're officially gambling. So following that kind of flow, when we looked at all 16 of these operators, this is what we found. 3 of them blocked access right at the top level. So big red X, we don't allow players in the state of New York. Easy enough. 10 allowed some sort of play at the lobby or game, the first coin mode, right? 5 of the testers found kind of independent behaviors. Some could play some games, some couldn't. I'm not quite sure what causes this, perhaps the aggregators and the things in between. So we found some kind of different behavior there. 2 of the operators prompted our testers to make a deposit in sweeps coin, which is kind of surprising. And 1 of them actually allowed gameplay in sweeps coin after the ban happened. So this is a video taken from one of our testers here. There's an aptly very American slot game. I don't know if you can see, but at the top here, they go from GC to sweeps coins. The game reloads, and it lets them play. So I will say this was done a week or 2 after the ban. We can confirm this is no longer the case now. I have no idea why this game was still available. I assume it was human error. But again, we make these things simple with, okay, this is like this now, okay, it's off. Sometimes if we actually look at the details from the ground up, we see the picture isn't as clear. It's a bit patchier. There's kind of a spectrum of good to bad or compliant to non-compliant. Things are not always black and white. They often land somewhere on that curve. Our next example, we'll look at the Philippines, which is a recently regulated market. There's a lot of operators in the Philippines that were once gray, have stopped, gotten licenses, come back in. It's an evolving market, so the regulations, KYC, AML is all kind of meeting the standards of other markets. I think PAGCOR is doing a great job of kind of modernizing this and setting an example for all of Asia. All the operators are very publicly committed to how much they are standing behind these things and take these things seriously. But again, when we get into the details sometimes, the execution doesn't always meet the intent. When we looked at these operators, we saw a lot of differences in how the identity is captured. So there was their live scan versus a document upload, how bad inputs were handled. We'll cover that in the next slide. How fast the whole process works, how many screens, how many verifications were involved, and if KYC actually blocked progress or blocked somebody from signing up for an account and going through the next steps. So again, because we're curious, we had we had a number of testers in the Philippines test 5 different operators. And what we asked them to do is, during the KYC check, give them a blurry ID, right? I don't know how they actually made it blurry. Maybe they put Vaseline on their camera lens or something. But all of them were asked to make an unclear upload for the KYC process. So out of the 5, the good news is 4, no problem. They detected a blurry ID. They didn't allow it. 1 did allow it. And out of these 5 as well, there are more operators, by the way. This is just our selection. 4 out of the 5 required a live scan. 1 of them allowed document upload. Now, I guess document upload's better than nothing, but it's probably pretty easy to get somebody else's ID and upload a PDF or something versus a live scan, right? So again, proof is in the pudding here. On the left, we have the behavior we would expect. A blurry ID gets captured. Upload, we'll see a big red X here, a verification decline. This is the behavior we'd kind of be expecting. On the right, not only is the blurry ID accepted, our tester was immediately bonused. So what this reveals, again, working as intended, it covers most of the use cases, but not always the margins and the edge cases. If you look at things in detail, often there are things that slip through the cracks. To do KYC properly, it's about process goals. It's not just about having the part in the flow and the software that checks it, right? Our last case study, we'll look at India. As I mentioned earlier, it went from a semi-regulated market to a suddenly very black market very fast, August of last year. India aggressively blocks offshore sites. We'll get into some of the specifics there. First, just a few stats just about the scale of this gray-black market. Referencing some stats here from Digital India Foundation, they found that these 3 operators in the last quarter of 2024, because that's where the data came from, alone had over 500 million website visits in India. Now, this doesn't include apps, it doesn't include VPN traffic, it doesn't include many other things. But just these 3 operators, which are, I don't think they're even the top 3 now if we look at the top 10. So we can assume this market is just absolutely enormous. How the black market thrives there, the same study cited 43 million visits from social. Facebook's pretty loose with what you can advertise, how you can push this traffic through. 184 million via search, and over 1.1 direct visits. Those direct visits mostly come from networks like WhatsApp, Telegram, affiliates. So even if there is blocking, there always is some middle layer that's pushing the players right back into the gray sites. The way this works, it's fairly simple. URL mirroring, URL changes. Essentially, the websites that operate in the gray markets, they change URLs constantly. They even shard their traffic out over multiple URLs. So if one is blocked, you're not taking down the whole site. An affiliate may have their own URL they can share. VIPs may be segmented somewhere else. So it's a very, very wide spread. If you have a login on one URL, it's the same anywhere. Your account, your history, your deposits, whatever, it's all there. So as long as you get that new URL, you're off to the races. And anybody that gambles on these sites is quite used to having to change every few months or two. I like to say it's a game of whack-a-mole, but imagine the game board's the size of a football field. There's just absolutely a huge amount to cover. So again, we were speaking earlier about how we like to just make this a black and white thing. Is it blocked? Is it not blocked? But we've started with all the URLs and how wide that spread is. And what we had our testers looked at in India was, okay, we know some of these URLs for some of these top providers here, top operators, gray market operators. Let's see if they're blocked or not. And because the blocking is done at an ISP level, they use something called DNS poisoning. So when the actual domain name is put in, the ISP is going to reroute that traffic to, a blocked page or however they do it. So even at the blocking level, we saw a lot of inconsistency. So here, if you look at Vodafone, 2 out of these 3 operators were allowed through. If you look at BSNL, they blocked all of them. We look at Stake, they were blocked across all 4. Parimatch is available out of 3 out of 4. So again, what sounded like a simple story with these sites are blocked comes into, okay, but which URLs, and now which URLs on which ISPs. So all sorts of interesting things you find when you look from the player experience up instead of the top down. So 3 markets that don't seem too related, but the pattern itself that ties them all together is fairly simple, and that is we oversimplify sometimes what we mean by compliance or blocking or leaving a market, and the intention does not always match the reality. How this affects these 3 groups, I mean, providers risk being available in places they shouldn't be and their reputation. Operators probably face the biggest risk, and that's their license if things go poorly. Regulators risk credibility. They need to enforce certain rules and ensure everybody that the playing field is fair as they can possibly make it. What do we recommend businesses do about this? I think there's kind of a 4th step that is often forgotten. Most businesses will design, build, and measure and continue that loop. The missing piece is to look at things from a software perspective from the ground up, to have people that can audit, to have people that can see, okay, if I do the famous mom or grandma test, right? Have them look at it. There's always something new to find when you put it in the user's hands. So execution matters more than statements. Verification can build trust with the regulators because you have a history of looking at things from the outside and having somebody independent, and having that evidence drives credibility. Where we fit, we've got real people all over the globe that can, obviously help you with these things. What's been interesting about building TESTA over the years is we find we didn't come up with this, like many large operators and providers have something like this. We just kind of professionalized it. I think a lot of people have been delivering to some far-flung market, and they're asking friends, family, or maybe somebody flies in there sometimes to check things. It's fairly common. But regardless if you're using us for the problem or not, having independent data, if you're asking an affiliate or partner for information, sometimes they've got an incentive to bend it one way or the other. So you need somebody that's truly independent, and you need somebody that can do it continuously, because something like compliance is not, a one and done or a one shot. If you have questions or discussion, please visit us at our stand. We're at 5C40 over by the enterprise stage. Are we doing questions now as well? I am, yeah.
Does anybody, okay, I'm back up. Does anybody have any questions? I know there's a lot of information, great information in there that we just highlighted, but wanted to see if there's any audience questions out there along the way. If you do, please just raise your hand and I hopefully can see you. One up here, hold on here.
Hi, great presentation, thanks for that. Have you done any testing with any of the US states like Michigan or PA? I know Michigan are regularly sending out sort of like cease and desist kind of letters. Just wondering if you've worked with them.
We've done testing in a lot of US states, yes. It depends on what, anything from new launches to testing payments. Not a lot of compliance-driven stuff in the US, but we test all over the globe, so yeah. Especially when a market first opens, we get a lot of people that want to verify their systems against others and make sure they're ready pre-launch before they go spend a whole bunch of marketing money on it.
Anybody else have any other questions? I don't see any. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. Let's give our colleague a round of applause here.